that nullifies the law, yes.
And it was their inaction
That's right.
that created.
That's right, yeah, it was like, I'm trying to remember what the legal term was for the papers that the US Supreme Court, was it a mandate or brief or something? They sent that in, Wisconsin was supposed to file it, the Wisconsin Supreme Court was supposed to file that decision. And then that would mean that Wisconsin was complying with the Supreme Court decision, and they didn't file it.
When it comes to this healthcare, so we nullify its implementation in Wisconsin, the people are still gonna get taxed by the federal government to support it, is that right?
Well, here's the interesting thing about that, is that because, at least right now, there is no funding mechanism for the federal exchanges. As long as we say no to the federal exchange, it doesn't look like they have a way to get the funding.
When it comes on my personal income tax, it's gonna be increasing.
No,
I don't think so.
No.
No, because they have to have an appropriation, they have to have permission from the House of Representatives to do that taxation.
Vicki McKenna talked about this today on a radio program. Without establishing exchanges, not only the companies won't get hit with the fines, penalties, or whatever they have to do, nor will citizens. You will not be hit with that.
Right.
So Governor Walker essentially protected all the citizens and the businesses in the state of Wisconsin. And this will also open the door for other business to come in here.
That's right.
Yes.
So,
I'm trying, okay, this is what we want, but there's a whole bunch of people in Milwaukee that thought Obamacare was the greatest, they're running around with the bumper stickers, I love Obamacare.
Yeah.
In essence, they're losing out by us having our way, so to speak. So how does that affect the other side?
Well, here's the thing, is that they think that they've lost out, but they actually haven't. And here's why, and here's the argument that really needs to be used. If Wisconsin stepped up and implemented this exchange, who pays for it if Wisconsin implements it? Wisconsin does, and it's an unfunded liability. So we do not have the money for it. They're estimating, just the government estimate is $70 to $100 million a year to run that exchange, to keep people coming. That's just in the state here. That's just, right. And you know that's a low figure because government figures are always low. The reality of a government program is always much more expensive than the estimate that they give you.
How much are we already spending on Badger Care?
A lot. I don't know that figure, but a lot. We spend a
Actually-
significant amount. And actually, Governor Walker just upped the amount that we're spending.
Isn't Badger Care being abused though?
Well, of course it is. Of course it is.
it's a government program.
Any government program is abused, absolutely.
So if there was gonna be an exchange, were we gonna get rid of Badger Care, or were we gonna run both?
Well, there's some question about how that would have gone, but Badger Care is essentially the Medicaid program here in Wisconsin. And the whole idea was that Medicaid would get expanded under Obamacare. And if you recall, when we were talking a little while ago about last winter's battle with the EIG, the Early Innovator Grant, and then there was another $11 million that also went back. There was an additional $11 million grant that was given at about the same time as that Early Innovator Grant that was meant to integrate the Medicaid system into the exchange. So the idea is that that's a huge part of how this Obamacare program works, is through the expansion of Medicaid. So by saying we won't expand the program, by saying we won't even engage in the program, we've stopped that from happening. If the state doesn't have the money to pay for a program, and if it goes down the road of this unfunded liability and starts going into debt in order to cover its expenses for this program, who is ultimately going to suffer? Everyone. Even the poorest. Even the people who this program supposedly was designed to help. If Wisconsin can't pay the bills, ultimately, those people lose out too. So that's what we have to understand, and what we have to be communicating to people, is that ultimately there was no money for this. The people of even the poorest of Wisconsin would have suffered under this program.
So if 20 other states do this, all those people in 20 states that don't have insurance are not gonna have insurance. So it's not a mandate. then how's it gonna be paid for, the others, you know, if, I
That's,
thought the idea of the Obamacare and making it a mandate was that that's how they could afford to pay for it, is
that's
that
the
everybody.
beauty of resisting it. Because what's gonna happen is if you get enough states rejecting the exchanges, it'll end up back in the laps of Congress and they're gonna have to figure out what to do. If there are 30 governors who are willing to do this, the bill is dead.
Yep, and so far, they've only been able to get 15 states to say they would actually set up an exchange, and most of those states are governed by Democrats.
And the other good thing
And
about
broke.
this,
I read that.
the other good thing about Walker saying he will not implement the exchanges, Walker is a role model.
Yeah.
And you can bet other states are gonna follow suit as a result of his decision.
Yes.
Now, tomorrow, after it makes the news, would it be a good idea to call the governor's office?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. Sure.
Yes, call the governor.
I talked to the guy today, a guy named Dan. He wouldn't even acknowledge, he said, I don't know what the governor's schedule is, but I said, I know he's at a conference today with the other governors. Okay, fine, whatever. Just tell him, I don't want it.
Yeah, right. But definitely call back and thank him. I mean, the more positive reinforcement we can give him when he does the right thing, the better. You know, if there's more rewards for him in doing the right thing, he'll do the right thing hopefully more often. So that's definitely, we should also be calling to thank Frank Lassay, who was the only senator to send out a very strongly worded press release encouraging the governor not to comply with Obamacare. So I would definitely ask that you call.
When was
and
this
thank
announced?
This afternoon.
This afternoon.
Because a friend of mine got an email from Frank and it was pretty negative.
Yeah, I too.
Well,
That's what I was
it was quite a surprise, and I can tell you, the inside view was that he was going to go ahead and do this. I really think that he got some support from some Republican governors once he got out to
I
Las
believe so
Vegas.
too.
I think they took him in a room and said, Scott, what are you doing, buddy?
I don't understand
Actually-
politically Scott Walker, but I think he's so bright. He's gonna lose no matter what. If he doesn't do the exchanges, the Obama administration is gonna come down on him and make him the, the goal. Oh, look at all the people in Milwaukee, you're poor people, he's not for you. But if he does them, you know that the other side is going to keep more mandates. They're gonna, and it doesn't have to be legal. Obama can just say, well, I think everybody needs 2 days a week off for their health, for stress relief.
Right.
And it's on now the health exchanges he would have set up, well, we can't afford to do that. And then the next election, they'll say, look what he did. Well, it didn't even have to go through Congress. Obama just had to say it. And he'd be blamed, and if you did implement it, they'd come with a bigger thing yet that you couldn't do.
Right.
And I don't see why Walker wouldn't just intuitively, he's a pretty good politician. It just
Why he
amazes
wouldn't
me
see
to
that,
even consider that. He's gonna get blamed if you don't set him up, but he can always come back and say, well, this is the Obama administration, don't talk to us, talk to them. Whereas if he does set it up, if you do comply with everything they want, they're just gonna make more giveaways, like I say. Or everybody needs a month off in the winter, like in France or something, for stress relief. You have to implement that.
Right, and then it's on him.
Then it's on
Then it's
him.
on him.
And so no matter how, you're gonna have to keep complying, and they're gonna make you to vote. And I just can't see how Walker
He
could
should have never
even
even
consider it.
considered
And it amazes me, a lot of these politicians on our side,
Especially if he
they
wants
play
to-
these games and they know that,
It's mysterious.
they're gonna
to-
blame them anyway.
It's mysterious to all of us what he was thinking. What we know is that he seems to be thinking correctly now, which is delightful. We're thrilled. The bottom line is if
Thinking
you
correctly
lose
or
your,
just complying with the pressure,
well,
So you always gotta be careful.
well, of course, absolutely. He still has to be watched like a hawk, just like any politician. Even the best politicians need to be watched. But the bottom line is if you lose your base, you're done. And if he would have done this, he would have lost his base. There's no question. So it's good that he decided to preserve his base.
Well, there's no way he would have been able to even come close to his jobs goal Because if you had the exchanges, your businesses aren't gonna come. Now you might have a chance,
Yes.
because businesses are gonna come.
Well, I think he was bowing to pressure from business, because the business wants this monkey off their back of help,
That's
of
right,
providing
yes.
health,
That is a
providing.
good point.
Businesses, I know a businessman, you just would like to hire somebody for so much an hour, whatever works,
Yeah.
and
It's
pay
not
them.
that big.
And that would take the pressure off of businessmen like
There-
tremendously.
There are a couple of different things that businesses were arguing for when they were saying, you know, go ahead, like Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce was pushing very hard for an exchange. And the two arguments that they were using was first, it will allow us to deal with people that we know. We'd much rather deal with the state than the feds. The problem is there's no such thing as a state-run exchange. When you really look at all of this, it was the feds who are always gonna be running it. Basically, Wisconsin would have been a storefront for a federal exchange, that's it. And second of all, if you think about it logically, they would have been able to dump a lot of employees onto the exchange, which, you know, however you wanna look at it as a business person, gee, if I don't have to, you know, pay for, you know, health insurance for my employees, that's a lot, you know, that affects my bottom line positively, you know? But our freedom being sacrificed for their bottom line right now is not the greatest strategy, so I'm really glad that, you know, we're off of that. Okay. Yes?
Something interesting happened with me today. I make my phone calls in my car, and I called Dan Lemieux, who he does not represent me, and he knows my name. What happened is he gave me the most information that I got from anyone, and the point I'm mentioning this for is make friends with all the politicians you can. Let them know who you are. Be nice. And it helps. It helps. You'll get so much more out of them. And
Why were you calling him if he's not your representative?
because I know him, I know he remembered me.
And because he has power over Jim.
Yeah.
He can vote to take away Jim's rights in his freedom, but increase his taxes. Even though Jim can't
What do you
afford
know
it.
my bottom
That's the
line?
whole reason why they can have the pay it tax, give money from California to try to get a Democrat elected here in Wisconsin.
Sure.
It's totally wrong that they can't vote for him, but they can give him money, but that guy, that they have in Congress, power to affect California.
But I wasn't sure if he was listening to us. I went and I called, she gave all those numbers for
Yeah.
like the assembly leader and the caucus leaders. I called them all.
Good.
Let's get those guys to push.
God
Push
bless you,
against
that's what we needed, that's
Yeah.
exactly what we needed.
How many of you called?
Yay!
You called
I
all
emailed.
of those that were on that list.
I did the first one, I called them all.
That's fantastic, that's really fantastic.
I sent an
email
to Walker and then I
And that's all you
Because, again, as we move forward with bucking some of this federal legislation that's gonna come at us over the next 4 years, we are going to need everybody calling, every number, and sometimes calling multiple times. You know, it can't just like, my mom was by to drop something off at my apartment the other day, and she said, well, your dad and I called, and I said, great, call again. That was my first thing out of my mouth. So we're just gonna have to keep the pressure on these people, because the bottom line is, when you are a legislator, something happens. When you get into that office, you start to worry about campaign dollars to be able to get reelected. And if you are getting people whispering in your ear and saying, hey, if you don't advocate for this policy, if you don't author this bill, if you don't co-sponsor this bill, if you don't vote for this bill, we're not really sure we're going to be giving you any more campaign money. Well, you know, in order to get reelected, you need dollars, right? And we understand that as voters, that campaigns cost money, but our legislators and our other elected officials need to be so much more afraid of losing our votes than of losing campaign dollars. And that takes the burning up the phone lines and the sending of the multiple emails and all of that. The base has got to be fired up. They have got to be making it clear. Yes, Phil?
No, just as a county supervisor, it is so easy to go native. And what I mean by going native is join the rest of the people on the board, because I call it the Cheers syndrome. Everybody wants to be Norm at Cheers. When you walk in the door, you get the smiles and the slapping on the back and howdy howdy. No one wants to be groused at.
Right,
Well, I made up my mind, I don't care if anybody likes me at all,
right.
I'm voting for my constituents.
Good for you. God bless you. That's exactly the way
But
we need it
I'm
to be.
telling you, from what I saw on the county board, I can just imagine how that goes in Madison. And then when you get to Washington DC, you never see your constituents. Oh,
Right,
forget it,
absolutely.
I can understand it.
Okay, one term, or one term. I'm sorry.
Probably.
Are there any other questions for Kirsten?
Yes.
Yes.
Kirsten, now as far as the employers are concerned, does the number 60 employees, is that where the break is, where the employer gets fined?
$50.
Right.
It was 50, yeah.
50? Okay. So the people that have 49 or less employees, they aren't fined the $2,000 per employee?
I don't think so, but I mean, the nice thing is that it's moot now, because as long as, that was only if the state set up its own exchange. Once that state-run exchange goes away, the possibility of it goes away, if it has to be a federally funded exchange, then that penalty goes away. So, yeah. Yeah,
Can they vote on something in the state legislature about being able to purchase insurance in other states?
well,
How
that's
is this gonna-
that's a tricky business. I know that Leah Vukmir is working on something that would involve interstate purchase of healthcare insurance, which, you know, is a great idea, and if she could figure out how to make it work. Here's the difficulty with that, is that we have a commerce clause in the Constitution that has been grossly misinterpreted again and again and again, and it's on the books and it's case law heavy. So particularly since the 1930s. So where regulate, to the founding fathers, meant to make regular, to make commerce actually happen between the states. The founding fathers, loved that interpretation, and that's what they meant. And you can find it in document after document after document. People like FDR and everybody who's come since FDR interpret it as, if you're selling stuff between states, we have an ability to regulate you. We can tax you, we can control how you do what you do. That's the problem. So essentially, selling insurance across state lines is another way of opening up a back door to the feds to control healthcare right now. Right now, a lot of the regulations that are boosting up the prices of healthcare, that's actually coming from the states. And that needs to be rolled back. That's something we should be working on our legislators about. There's some of that at the federal level, but a lot of it is going on at the states, and that's because the insurance companies, it's crony capitalism.
Right.
Insurance companies want to make sure that they aren't competed against.
Well, here in Wisconsin, I understand it's very competitive. It takes like the top 16 health insurance sales companies that actually do the insurance. 16 of them are required to get 80% of the market, share 80% of the health insurance market. In states like Arkansas, where you have one insurance company that writes 65% of the health insurance in that state. That's what's wrong. And that's why these people who say, oh, I want to buy insurance across state lines, that won't help Wisconsin one bit, because we have a competitive market, but we
Right.
do have too many regulations.
Yes.
It is too expensive, and we ought to bust up the monopolies that we have, especially Aurora.
That's-
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And why we can't bust up that monopoly? Wherever they buy real estate, it's the most expensive real estate in town. And they build the prettiest buildings, and how does that help me be a healthcare person?
Right. Right, but this is it, I mean, if we could roll back some of this, regulation on health insurance in the state, we would start to
And
see.
healthcare.
Yes, we would start to see the price of healthcare drop, just on that alone,
Yep.
so.
And one last question, and that's it.
I just wanted to check out one little fact about nullification, and it's very interesting that Jane had sent out an email, and I thought it was very interesting that within,
She's biting her fingernails already.
within the Affordable Health Care Act, there was actually a clause that allowed for nullification of Obamacare.
Really?
Yes. You
I
remember
heard
that?
something like that
You
too.
actually-
Yeah,
I
because
thought
they
I
did-
saw that too, Jane, you sent me
Yeah,
that.
that's
What
it.
article was that in?
No, it was an email that you sent.
It's
Fascinating.
because they
Yeah.
didn't, it's the joint and severability thing, I think. They didn't say that, you know, usually they put in a joint and severable, which means if one section of the law is ruled null and void or not accepted, then the whole thing, that doesn't ruin the whole
Right.
thing.
Right.
I think in this case, because you don't comply with one thing, that means you don't have to comply with the whole thing. I think they left out that clause.
Yeah.
So I did bring, so that you guys can continue to educate yourselves on nullification and educate your neighbors. I've got a ton of nullification CDs here, DVDs. You can take as many as you want. I've actually got more in the car too, if you want to take a bunch of them. I'm literally, they're coming out my ears because everybody needs to know about this concept. So feel free to take these on your way out, as many of them as you want. And if I need to go back out to my car to get more, I will go out to my car and get more. Okay?
Can we give Kirsten a big I just wanted to cover two things quickly. One, and you touched on it, prepare. Things are gonna get rough. Stock up on food, water, because the economic collapse is probably gonna wipe out the currency, the dollar. And I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up in the barter system, but we are gonna have to be able to work together to get through these rough times. There are gonna be rough times. Don't fool yourself. Do whatever you can to prepare for it.
That's how do you keep others from panicking and turning to the government, which was what they want.
Right.
Well,
And
that's
they
where
want
we,
you to
that's
say,
where,
help me.
no, this is where her idea here is gonna help, because if we can reach out to people, to our neighbors, and we can work together with our neighbors, you know, to help get through these times, and learn how to help each other versus lean on the government. I mean, that's where we're gonna be effective. So, the other thing too, I know it's a holiday season. I know everybody's very tired. I am, I'll be quite honest, I'm burnt out after putting in 10 and 14-hour days for 2 months prior to the elections. I want you to really put a focus on these holidays this year. We have a lot to be thankful for. Even though things look kind of bleak right now, there is still a lot to be thankful for. The fact that the governor has decided not to implement the state exchange is huge, because that was a huge step in protecting us. And so we need, to make sure that we focus on those positive things. So I want you to take some time with your families and think about the things that you've been blessed with. And I'm not going to get as intense these next 2 months, but come January 1st, get ready, okay? We're going to get down and dirty, and we're going to get to work, and we're going to make a difference here in our county. So, but that's the one thing. Also, would you guys like potluck? Just something light to do as a group?
There's a lot of things going on.
For the holiday,
How
about in January?
Instead of a meeting, maybe have a potluck and just
how
have
about
some.
in January when we sit down and start deciding what we're gonna do?
Rather,
Well, we could do that,
Yeah,
if that's what you would like.
cause there's some.
But I know everybody's pretty busy with the holidays, and this would be a good time just to take some time to breathe and think about things that we can be thankful about. Yes, Phil?
Julie was also suggesting, Gail, that she wanted to provide food for a group or something for the holidays.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to Julie's house for Thanksgiving.
Surprise!
But she said she wanted to provide food for this group before the holidays.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to talk to her.
Talk to her about
But I know in the past we've had potluck, somewhere, in between the holidays, and just as a way of celebrating our successes. And let me tell you, even though we lost, we did a lot of good things this
it.
year.
Oh, yeah.
A
Absolutely.
lot of good things. We made an impact. Just look at the numbers, the election numbers in Sheboygan
We had a
County.
landslide.
We, our efforts, the efforts that were made in this county were tremendous. And it shows the dedication that each of you.
At the poll that I worked at in south side of Sheboygan, at least 95% people voted, and I was registering people all day. Everything's fine,
Oh, good.
There's,
at least 95%.
yeah,
So-
there's one other little known fact is, between the 2008 election and the 2012 election, Sheboygan County actually added 5% to
Yep,
the Republican side.
That's great.
yep,
Cool.
so that just shows our efforts, so.
Yes.
But thank you,
Yes.
and,
Grab DVDs on your way out.
Okay.
thanks
Thanks for
everybody.
being